Hello, today we're going to dig into SlideRule Analytics' new GA4 offline user feature. Let's dig in. This feature flags users' purchases, it flags orders that are created purely offline. So you can see here in this Shopify store, we have several Shopify sources. We have web, that's a normal Shopify order placed on a Shopify store. We have POS, that's point of sale. We have Shopify draft orders. Those are orders that are created by staff as draft orders and then sent and paid by the user either by invoice or something else. And then we have some apps, an app that's creating orders here as well. Cool. We also have issues that we don't see here, but we often have imported orders. So we have apps that will import orders from another store, things like that, or from another source. Those as well will show up in here. The reason why these orders show up that are not online with SlideRule Analytics is SlideRule Analytics fires purchase events server side, like we've talked about a lot. So all of the orders that end up in Shopify end up in your Google Analytics 4. That's very valuable because it means that you can make a one-to-one comparison very quickly between Google Analytics 4 and Shopify and see that the revenue and order accounts match very quickly. You can also do other things. Shopify draft orders could be created by a customer who subsequently places an online web order. In Google Analytics 4, you could see that, and you could see that those draft orders, that same customer placed a Shopify draft order and subsequently placed a web order. You could see that all in Google Analytics 4 with our server-side events. However, it does have this one downside. Many of these offline orders are not relevant to the kinds of analysis that we do in Google Analytics 4. For instance, if we want to know our total conversion rate, we want to know the number of purchases divided by the number of sessions, let's say last week, or the number of users last week. We really don't want, for instance, point of sale orders to be part of that calculation because that would skew the conversion rate metric to be too high. Same with draft orders and imported orders. Those aren't necessarily relevant to our analysis of things like web conversion rates or PDP conversion rates, things like that. So we need a simple way to filter them out. In Universal Analytics, you could create a view where you could filter out offline users very easily. So if you were used to Universal Analytics, you could create a view that said like, hey, if the session if there was no session associated with this order, or if the order was a POS order, just filter it out of this view and you could use the view. Of course, there's no views in Google Analytics 4, so we need to replace that with something. What we've done here in SlideRule is we have created an additional dimension that we send called offline user. This one. That offline user dimension will be true for draft orders, imported orders, if we can detect that it is an imported order, which we can in most cases. So we said POS, imported orders, and draft orders. Those will all be included in offline users. Right. So that will flag them for us. Those will flag the conversions, those purchases as offline orders. The other thing that we do is when it's an offline order, and this gets a little bit in the weeds, but it's important to understand for the way that Google Analytics 4 works. When it's an offline user, we don't set the customer ID as the user ID in Google Analytics. The reason why is we want to cover that case where someone makes an offline order, say on Monday, say they go into your store and they make a POS order, or you create a draft order for them on Monday, and they like your product so much that the following Tuesday, they go back to your Shopify store and they create a new order, right? And they create that order directly on the store. Now, in that case, the user would be the second user would be an online user. The first user would be an offline user. If we put the customer ID as the user ID in for both of them, then Google Analytics 4 will unite them into the same user and use the most recent property. In the example that I gave you, that offline order would now appear as an online order. We still send the customer ID here as a custom dimension. So it's still available to you. You can still do all kinds of analysis of how people go from your offline store to your online store and things like that. But we don't set it so that way Google Analytics 4 doesn't do what's called back propagating the most recent value for the offline user parameter. Okay, cool. So with those technical details out of the way, let's talk about how you can use this, right? So we're sending this this property called offline user for all orders that are placed on point of sale, draft orders, or imported orders if we can detect that it's an imported order. Unfortunately, Shopify doesn't have a flag that says that it's an imported order that we can use, but we use a couple of techniques to determine if it's an offline imported order. Okay, cool. So we've got that flag. How do we use it? Right. The first thing is, if you're using Google Analytics 4 at all extensively, you're probably using explorations. So the easiest way that you can use this in an exploration is to go ahead and create a user segment. You could call this online users, because that's often what we care about the most. We want to filter out POS orders from the online users, right? You could provide a description, but what you're going to do is you're going to look for the offline user scoped dimension, and you're going to say does not exactly match 1, because 1 is true in a Boolean, right? Cool. And you'll see this here, and it'll update. Now, we just released this feature, so it doesn't apply backwards. We literally released it this morning. So you'll see here that I don't see, I see that this says that it's 100% of sessions. That's just because, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to make this adjust data backwards in Google Analytics 4. But you will start to see this populate from today forward, right? Cool. You can also build an audience. I do recommend that if you build an audience, you set it to the maximum limit, right? And you can click Save and Apply to create the online user. Now, if you wanted to investigate offline users, you could do exactly the opposite. That would be you create this exact same thing, but you say the offline user does not, you'd say you would want to do, you want to include offline user exactly matches 1. And if you do that, that will be offline users. Cool. Good. We do automatically set the offline user parameter for new stores, those that just recently added SlideRule Analytics. For old stores, it won't be there by default. So let me show you how to add that offline dimension so you can create these segments and things like that. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to go to Admin, and you're going to select Custom Dimensions, and you're going to create a custom dimension. Good. You're going to name the dimension offline user. You're going to select the scope to user. You can give it a description like this one. And then the user property you want is offline user, like that. And you hit save. And that's all you have to do to create the custom definition. So create the custom definition, then create the segment and or audiences that you want for both offline and online users. Online users is really the segment that's most important for analysis of like conversion rates and things like that. So take a look at that. Let us know if you find this useful. If you do want this feature added and you have another source of your Google Analytics 4 data today in Shopify, check out our app, SlideRule Analytics, and you'll get this feature. It's completely free, so check that out. Thanks for